What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I have another edition of top 5 teams to rebuild in Madden 23, but we're going to be using the start today. Well, at least starting the week in the wild card round, since apparently that's the latest that Madden can update the game. Before I do that, go ahead and hit that like button, hit that sub button, and turn that bell notification on. And let's see who number 5 is. So the first team is going to be the Detroit Lions. The reason I have them at 5 is because I had them in my last top 5 list from the beginning of the season, but this still holds true today. This team comes with a lot of young players, but also it is still lacking quite a bit of talent. So there is plenty for you to do to reshape this team and to bring them to the next level. Plus, you also have to decide, what are you going to do with Jared Goff? Are you going to use him going into the future, coming off of that big season? Or are you going to turn to a new quarterback? That's always the biggest question for me in franchise mode. What do I want to do with the quarterback? The running backs, Jamal Williams coming off of that historic season for the Lions. I don't foresee him being a number 1 back, but if you want to use him that way, you can. He's still 27. DeAndre Swift is here at 23. The receiving core is loaded. Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's now a superstar. Jamison Williams is going to be healthy. DJ Chark, do you decide to keep him? Do you let him go? Josh Reynolds. Tight end definitely needs to be worked on immediately. There is nobody here. Across the offensive line, it's pretty solid. Taylor Decker, you have Jonah Jackson, Frank Ragnow. That guy, probably need to replace him. And then Penei Sewell. These offensive linemen are, for the most part, set to go. You won't have to do a lot of messing around with this, aside from maybe getting yourself another guard to start at the right guard spot. Defensively, you have Aiden Hutchinson, but the rest of the front 7 is pretty much bad. Aquara is your second best defensive lineman, and that's not something to be proud of. D tackles need to be reworked, and you get to create pretty much anything you want with this linebacker group. The one piece you have to work with is Malcolm Rodriguez, who came out of nowhere this year to be a really, really good rookie player, and somebody you can definitely build up. At the corner position, you do have a guy you can rely on in Jeff Okudah. Behind him, though, there's a lot of questions, a lot of retooling that is needed. And then at the safety position, I think there's a couple of good players here. Tracy Walker is pretty good, but you also have Kirby Joseph, the rookie, who is now a 76, and then Deshaun Elliott at strong safety. So while the defense does need some retooling, specifically in the front 7 and maybe another piece in the secondary, and on top of having some pretty good young talent to work with, you have a lot of cap space to work with. $104 million based off of the current salaries that are on this team, which is going to help you immensely in free agency, trades, being able to take hits on certain players if you want to move on from them and not, like even like Jared Goff here. I mentioned before, do you want to keep him? Do you want to get rid of him? With that kind of cap space, if you really want to move on from him, yeah, there's a $10 million penalty, but you're still getting $20 million in savings, and you can afford to take that hit for the next season or two because you have so much cap room. So the door is wide open for what you want to do with Detroit. And I honestly thought about keeping them off this list because I had them on my last list. But with the amount of picks that they have this year and the money, I just could not keep them off the list. They have 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 2 6th. They don't have a 7th, but I think you'll be fine. Now it's time for the number 4 team. Our number 4 team is going to be the Carolina Panthers. Much like the Detroit Lions, they just need a path to follow and somebody to lead them on that path. They've got capital and they've got some good young talent, but there still remains a lot of question marks on this team. And the biggest question mark of them all is, what do you do at quarterback? You need one. Darnold is obviously not going to get the job done. PJ Walker, even if you want to try and build him up, he's already 27. And Matt Corral is such a low overall that I don't know if you can even get him to the point of being a serviceable starter for you. Probably have to spend a first-round pick on a quarterback in the first year of your franchise. The same can be said really for the running back room. Deontay Foreman had a great comeback year, I think. Do you want to roll with him? You have Chuba Hubbard here as well. DJ Moore is still here. Laviska Shenault comes over from the Jaguars. Terrace Marshall, second-year guy, is he finally going to get a chance to play? Who knows? So you have plenty of wiggle room to bring in your guys, but you also have some young talent that you can develop if you'd like to between Shenault, Marshall, even Shi Smith down here if you'd like. Tight end needs to be reworked as well, same as the Lions. Who are you going to bring in? Yes, you could probably get away with Thomas or Tremble as your 2 and 3 or whatever the case, but you need to have a solidified playmaker here. The one good thing, though, is you have a young left tackle that's already a 77 overall. He is going to fare you well into the future. One important position you do not have to worry about for several years. The interior of the line is going to need some work. Christensen here, only a 73 overall. Bozeman, a 72. You do have Austin Corbett, which is nice to have. And then Taylor Moton out here, which will be good for a few years. He's only 28, and in lineman years, that's like 25 for receivers. So you're pretty much set on the ends. It's really the interior we're going to need to do some work to refill. But again, not a whole offensive line rebuild is needed for this team to be successful. And then, of course, on defense, you got some studs, man. Brian Burns, absolute beast. Derek Brown, who I think is an awesome defensive tackle. Jack Thompson at the outside linebacker position. J.C. Horn, who is an 80 overall and 22 years old in this file. Plus, you have C.J. Henderson, who's 23. And then Jeremy Chin, one of those hybrid type linebacker safety players you could probably put all over the field in different formations, but either way, he's going to be a great player for you. Outside of those guys, though, there is room for improvement. Gross Matos, do you want to work with him? A second defensive tackle is probably going to be something you need to look at soon. Luvo, I think that's how you say his name, is Luvu. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. He's 25 and a 79 overall, so definitely somebody you can build up, but I'm not a fan of his speed. So in my personal opinion, I would definitely look into getting somebody different there. The middle linebacker position needs to be reworked. Damian Wilson, already 29. He's just not going to be able to get it done for you long term. And then the free safety position is another one that's up in the air. So with this team, you have a few more, I would say a few more studs than that of the Lions. You have some marquee players in good positions like Chin and Burns and Thompson, and then on offense you have a few good pieces at the wide receiver core and at left tackle, but there's still a lot of room for you to put your own personal touch on it, which is what I love about doing the franchise rebuilds. This team also comes with a lot of money to spend, $80.2 million in cap space, so you know that you have plenty of money, and you're going to need it though, because a guy like Brian Burns, as you can see here, is up for contract soon. Same with Derek Brown. You're going to definitely want to re-sign these guys. Now, the file I'm looking at is advanced years, so these guys will be good on your team up through your first year of playing if you're starting from the wild card round. You won't have to re-sign them that first offseason, so you do have some time, but something to consider when if you do decide to go with the Panthers and you're not sure what you want to do with these guys, keep in mind you're going to have a couple of big contracts coming due rather soon. This team is also pretty well off in the draft pick department. They don't have 2 firsts, but they do have a top 15 pick, the number 12 pick to be exact. Plus, they have 2 second-round picks, a 3rd, 2 4ths, and then a 5th to close out. So they only have 7 picks as a team, but having those 2 seconds and an early first will definitely help you with getting this team back on the right track. And that brings us to our number 3 team, which is the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts are similar to that of the Panthers, but they have different playmakers in different areas, but they still have a lot of pieces in place already. You really just need to fine-tune the roster and bring in, of course, a quarterback, because Matt Ryan is definitely not going to be the guy you need to play with. And unless you plan on trying to use Sam Ehlinger, you don't even have a guy on this roster below the age of 30 between Nick Foles and Matt Ryan. It does help you also have an absolute beast at the running back. Jonathan Taylor, 90 overall, 23 years old, X Factor. He is going to be somebody that you can rely on while you build up your quarterback. And I like their wide receiving core. Michael Pittman Jr. is that big-bodied red zone target that you can use. Paris Campbell's got some speed to him, can play in the slot pretty well. And Alec Pierce is another guy who I think is one of the more underrated receivers that came out of this class. I saw him do some really good stuff throughout the season, and I would definitely be trying to build him up to be a great receiver. 92 speed, 6'3". The tight ends seem to be in a rough spot because all of these teams so far have needed some work. Mo Alley Cox, I think sort of gets underrated in Madden, but this is the rosters we have to work with. You have a 73 overall tight end. You do have Jelani Woods, who would be somebody that's really cool to build up at 6'7". Definitely somebody you want to try and get into the red zone. This is another one where you will not have to really put in a ton of time on the offensive line, because sometimes it gets a little boring. But you have Raymond here, who's 24 years old, 74 overall. You have one of the best in the business in Quentin Nelson at left guard. Ryan Kelly is a serviceable center. He is 29, but still a very serviceable center. You definitely need a right guard. Danny Pinter is not the guy. And then you have Braden Smith at 26 years old and an 83 overall. On defense, they do have pieces. Kwity Paye is somebody that you can definitely look to build up and turn into a great defensive end. And then they have Yannick Ngakoue, who probably a bridge player at best, but something that you don't have to initially find a starter for if you don't want to. D tackles, you're loaded. DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, a great tandem. And then, of course, you have Shaquille Leonard. And he is an absolute monster. You already know. He is 27, but he will hold down the fort for your linebackers and really for your defense for quite a few years yet. Bobby Okereke is a really underrated linebacker as well. I've had to play him quite a bit in my Texans franchise, and he is always making plays on the ball. You need one linebacker here, though. Zaire Franklin is not your guy. But this front seven is actually pretty stout. And this is why I sort of have this list built this way, because every team needs work, but it's not all the same work, except for a few positions. But this one, for the front seven, you're pretty much good to go. You just need to maybe fill in like one or two positions, and then you're set to go with some of the veterans you have. The cornerbacks is where it starts to get a little murky, because while you do have some great 1 and 2s with Gilmore and Kenny Moore, Gilmore is 31 now. And Moore is not far behind him at 27. He'll be 28 by the time you end up taking this team over. And outside of them, you have Isaiah Rodgers. And that's really the only guy below 25 years old, unless you're going to talk about Dallas Flowers down here. So this is going to be needing to be reworked. Julian Blackmon is definitely somebody that you can build up. He is a good player, 76 overall. He's only 24. Strong safety, though, I think that you are set. While he is a lower overall, Nick Cross is only 20 years old. You might be able to get away with not touching these guys for a couple of seasons. The cornerback room is where the most of the work needs to be done on defense. And then as the offensive side of the ball, of course, you need your quarterback and your tight end. This sort of surprised me when I saw this, when I was going through which teams I wanted to put on this list. Even with all of these stars on this team, they still have $94.4 million in cap room, and this is in the offseason. So I'm showing you the rosters from the regular roster, and then I simulated into the future to get to the offseason so we could get the real cap number that you'll be seeing. And they have a lot of money. This is done basically just by getting rid of some of these old quarterbacks, just not re-signing them or having them retire. I think Matt Ryan retires usually, but either way, you're going to have a lot of money to work with here. Draft picks for the Colts are not the most sellable item for this team, but they do have a pick in each round to go along with an extra 7th round pick. And now the Washington Commanders pop up as the number 2 team on my list. And that's simply because this whole franchise is just a mess. There are so many opportunities that you can do with this team. Aside from rebuilding the offense and continuing to build that defense that they have on the front 7, you could really even relocate this team and it wouldn't even be that unrealistic. The team is up for sale in real life. The Commanders have been just horribly done with this whole Dan Snyder situation. The team has not been the same since they've been changed away from the Redskins name into the Washington Football Team and the Commanders. Now, whatever side of the argument you are on that one, that is your prerogative, but I don't think it's been a very popular name for the fan base. I don't think a lot of people have taken to the new identity of the team. You could really just relocate this team and change this whole franchise and just get rid of all doubt that Dan Snyder is still involved. But if you do stick with them, they do actually have some decent uniforms, which is always a plus. If you have good uniforms, at least you can fall back on that. As for the team, though, the offense is where it all starts with the questions. And yes, once again, it's about the quarterback. You got Taylor Heineke. Love him or hate him from last year, guess what? He's 29. Carson Wentz, I don't think he's any good. I would get rid of him as fast as I could if I were you guys. And then you have Sam Howell, who could be a potential down-the-road starter for you. I wouldn't be completely against it, but you're going to have to bring somebody in, or you're going to have to go through a couple of years of bad quarterback play while a guy like Howell gets acclimated and grows with his overall. You have plenty of running backs to choose from. Brian Robinson Jr. and Antonio Gibson. I prefer Gibson because of his abilities elsewhere in the pass game and the return game, but Robinson is one of those big, powerful running backs that you just don't see come along all that often. 6'2", 224. Definitely somebody that I would like to build up and at least have in the rotation at the running back position. And And then you got Scary Terry on the outside. You have Curtis Samuel, and then of course you have Jahan Dotson, who I think would have been potentially Rookie of the Year candidate if it had not been for the injuries that took place and sort of wiped out the middle portion of his rookie season. He was on a tear there for the first half of the year when he was playing, and then he just fell off and he just never came back after the injury, it seemed like. De'Ami Brown, you don't need to touch this wide receiver room, to be honest with you. Like, maybe you do if you just don't like these guys, but they have a lot of youth here. And Brown was kicking my butt, let me tell you that. Last year with the Vikings franchise, if you guys watched that one, every time we played these guys, they were just killing us. This is another guy that you could really rely on to build up for the future. You have Cam Sims here for your big body guy, and you have Dax Milne, who I don't think many people like him anymore, but whatever. Bottom line is you have a lot of receivers here. You don't have to go searching for a bunch of receivers in your rebuild. Maybe just the whole league sucks at tight end except for like 5 teams, because you need another one here. Logan Thomas, while he's pretty decent, is 31. John Bates and Cole Turner are well below the 70 overall mark, so not people that you can rely on from the get-go. The offensive line is decent, but is getting old. Charles Leno Jr., now 30. He'll be good for a couple years yet, but left tackle has to be in the back of your mind while you're doing this rebuild. Andrew Norwell, same thing. He is 30 now. Chase Roulier, however you say it, he's 29. Try Turner is 29. The only young player you have is Sam Cosmi at 23 years old and at 75 overall. So this is a team that definitely needs a whole offensive line shift. And now we're on to this part where you really don't have to do nothing. Chase Young here. Montez Sweat, who I think is very underrated, especially for his speed in Madden. He can be an absolute game breaker. Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne in the middle. Excellent tandem at D-tackle. And then there are some question marks here on the linebacker core, though. David Mayo, don't think you want to roll with him. You have Cole Holcomb here. You do have one piece that you can build up, though. Jamin Davis, at 23 years old, is somebody that you can look to turn into maybe one of your mainstays. The secondary is also pretty questionable. Kendall Fuller is here. Yes, he is. But Benjamin St. Juste, he's 75 overall. And then it drops all the way down to a 70 with Danny Johnson. And then you got pretty much practice squad guys here for the other 3. Corner will be a big point of you rebuilding the Commanders for sure. The free safeties are not in a great spot, but there are 2 young, strong safeties here, Cameron Curl and then Derek Forrest. So if you can work both of these guys into being your safeties, you're pretty much set here at the safety position. So the story of this team is going to be the offensive line, the quarterback, and the secondary. As is the story with every one of these teams, there is an abundance of cap space for you to work with in order to do what you need to do to get this team where you want them to be. The reason I have the Commanders up at the number 2 spot is not because the abundance of draft picks, it's not because of the cap space, it's really because this team gives you so many options as to what you can do. Do you want to build the team that you have? You can do that. Do you want to flip the team you have and get your own players? You can do that. You have young players to use for trade bait. You don't have anybody outside of maybe a few like McLaurin and maybe Allen and Young that you absolutely need to keep on this team to make it seem legit. And then if you really want to get crazy, you can blow the whole thing up and you can relocate to a whole different team. And speaking of that, I'm going to be putting out a video for my top 10 relocation uniforms to use. Not just relocation teams, my top 10 favorite uniforms to choose. So keep an eye out for that, and maybe you can get an idea of what to do with this Commanders team from there. And then the last piece of it, of course, the draft picks. This is just straight up picks 1 through 7. They're not missing any, but they don't have any extra. And that brings us to the number 1 team on my list for franchise mode following the 2022 NFL season, and that is the Chicago Bears. The Bears are the number 1 team. And the reason for that is, well, sort of a mixture of everything that we've seen with every other team, except for one other area that I think is important, and that is that they already have a quarterback. Justin Fields is exactly the kind of quarterback that you would go and draft if you were on any of these other 4 teams. He can run. He's probably one of the he probably is the fastest quarterback in the game. He's only 23 years old, and while he's not an 80-something overall, he's a 76. This is the best you're going to get in terms of a young quarterback to build around. And you don't have to spend your first-round pick on him, which means you can do whatever you want. You also have a darn good running back room. David Montgomery is a great option to work with. Khalil Herbert has been awesome in rotation. The receiving room is where it starts to get a little tricky. Darnell Mooney is here, obviously can be a legit deep threat for you, but is he a true number one, or do you need more people around him to really let him flourish? And this is also the first team that actually has a tight end. You don't need to worry because Cole Kmet is here, 23 years old, 78 overall, 6'6" tight end. I would say that this offensive line is a sort of a mixture. You have some good pieces, but there are also some areas that definitely need some work. Braxton Jones here, rookie, 23 years old, 75 overall. Cody Whitehair will carry you over for a couple of seasons at left guard, but you will need to bring some more interior guys in. You have Lucas Patrick, who will definitely need to be replaced. You do have Tevin Jenkins, who is a young right guard that you can build up. And then Riley Reif, who I don't even know how he's still in the league after his years with the Vikings, is at your right tackle position. He will also need to be replaced. So sort of a mixed bag on the O-line. This defense is where things started to get a little crazy for the Bears. They seem to sort of blow their whole defense up this offseason when they traded away Roquan Smith to the Ravens. Travis Gibson, definitely not going to be the guy for the future. Dominique Robinson is a guy that you could potentially build up, but with him being a 71 and already a 24-year-old, chances of him being able to turn into something great is slim, unfortunately. Defensive tackles, you need to replace all of them. The linebacking core is abysmal. Matthew Adams is 70 overall. Jack Sanborn is 71. At least he's a rookie, so somebody you can work with there. And Nicholas Morrow is a 27-year-old at 71 overall. So a whole new linebacking core is needed for this team. At the corner position, you do have a couple of pieces that you can build around. Jalen Johnson, a solidified, I think, number one corner. You also have Kyler Gordon, a rookie. Aside from that, though, you'll be bringing in some new people. You have the longtime safety Eddie Jackson here at free safety. So you have a holdover, and you don't need to concern yourself too much with that and just focus on the front seven. And then at the strong safety, Jaquan Brisker has turned into a great find for them in the draft, and he will be good to go for quite some time. One of the other reasons that the Bears are the number one team, aside from having Justin Fields, is they have a stupid amount of cap room. $189 million at the end of this season. Now, of course, this was after a couple of the contracts did not get done. And even if some of those contracts go through, you're still looking at having roughly, 150 million. You're barely paying anybody at this point because the team is just so low overall. So you can do whatever you want. You can sign every big ticket free agent. You have all the money in the world right now when it comes to the NFL standard. But then you get to the draft picks and you still have the number one overall pick. So not only do you have your quarterback, you have all of the money you could ever want for free agency, but you also hold the number one pick in the upcoming draft to take whichever player you want. Or you could trade this pick and just load this team up for the next 2 seasons with draft picks and rebuild this team in as little as 2 years. The choice is yours, but either way, the Bears are by far the best team to start a rebuild with, considering the pieces they have, the money they have, and the draft positioning that they have in this first year that you'll be taking the team over. Well, there you have it, guys. That is the top 5 teams to start a franchise with today following the 2022 season. However, I do have a bonus team added, much like I did on my last top 5 rebuild teams video. But this one is not about a team that's great for rebuilding. This is sort of a personal challenge type of team. So if you're looking for a good challenge, one that is going to be a long-term project, this is the team that you might want to roll with heading in to the latter part of Madden 23, and that is the San Francisco 49ers. Yes, one of the best teams in the league right now. Not only do they have one quarterback in place, they have 3. They have Jimmy Garoppolo, who, well, at this point is pretty much dead in the water, but he is still only 30, and in quarterback years, that's not the worst. You have Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant himself, and you also have Trey Lance. Which one do you want to go with, or do you not want to go with any of them? You have Christian McCaffrey, you have Elijah Mitchell, you have Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Trent Williams, Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, And the strong safety Hufanga, who sort of came out of nowhere during this season in his second year. And the reason I mentioned this team and all those great players is because, well, because you don't have much money left. It says here you have $40.1 million, but that's before signing Nick Bosa. So the challenge of this team is you have to decide which quarterback you want to go with. You have to find a way to stay competitive. And if you decide that you want to blow it all up, you're going to need to trade a lot of your players away because you're not picking till the 5th round. Yes, that is right. They have 2 5ths and 2 7ths in this file, and that's all the draft picks you get. And this is why they are the challenge team, if you will, because you don't get a team with nobodies that you just get a bunch of draft picks and a bunch of money for. You have to create money, you have to be patient, you have to make tough decisions at quarterback, and then you have to find a way to manufacture yourself some draft picks or go through the season with no rookies. So if you're looking for a challenge, go ahead and take on these 49ers. They have some of the best players in the entire league all in this team at one time. You can have some fun with them for the first season, but then comes the fun part of trying to recoup all of the assets they lost, making this team what it is. And if you're looking for more of a short route to just start rebuilding immediately, you have 5 other teams to choose from. I hope you can pick one of them. If you like what you saw, please make sure you hit that like button. You guys know it helps us out here in the YouTube world. Drop that sub if you want to see some more stuff like this, because I do put out some of these videos from time to time. Turn that bell notification on so anytime something new drops, you know about it. And I'll see you guys next time.